Hello gamers, today I am back looking at another game in the racing simcade genre. I mean, hey, I have a sim setup that cost me over 5 grand and I haven't used it since I made that Breaking Point 2 video. This game being Microsoft rebooting of the long on hiatus series Forza Motorsports, the more realistic quote-unquote game in the branch of the Forza series, along with obviously Horizons being the less quote-unquote realistic one. And on the topic of sim rigs, let's start off with controls. This game being a racing game, there are 3 sets of controls you can use, that being WASD, a controller, and a set of pedals and wheels. And well, WASD isn't a real option. Like, it should literally never be used ever, so we won't talk about that one. So let's start off with the wheel. And unfortunately, there is something just off about using a racing wheel for this game, and I can't quite describe it, it's just something is wrong. It also doesn't help that the game starts off with a bunch of dead zones in the pedals that just make absolutely no sense for it to be the default. And also, the car seems very understeery whenever you're on a wheel. So I ended up playing a fair amount of this game on controller. It is very clear that this game was designed for controller in mind, which is fair as it's a primarily Xbox title and most people will probably be playing it with a controller, as I was setting faster laps on a gamepad than I was with my wheel, at least at the start of it, and it's also just more enjoyable playing it on the pad. But hopefully they can fix some of the wheel issues like the dead zones and other stuff with patches, as I could see this game being one of the main simcade racing games for people with wheels in the future, especially because it's on PC. However, ignoring the wheel, there is one other major problem keeping Motorsports from becoming a top tier racing game, and that is its severe lack of tracks. The game has launched with only 20 racing tracks, some of those tracks having multiple layouts, but still only 20 laps. And don't get me wrong, there are some classic tracks there like Spa-Francorchamps, Indianapolis, Watkins Glens, Le Mans, Road America, and Kyalami, which already makes it better than the F1 calendar. And the tracks, from what I read at least, are all laser scanned, which if you don't know anything about it, laser scanning is very good compared to just sort of guessing, I guess. And it should be the bare minimum for any game that wants to put simulator anywhere in the title. But there are some very notable tracks missing, like your Brands Hatches, Mount Panorama, also known as Bathurst. But most importantly to me, and many other racing fans, I feel, they are missing the Green Hell itself, the longest racetrack in the world, the Nordschleife. They have the Nürburgring, or they have Nuremberg, the circuit, GP circuit of the track, but they are yet to have the full ring. And obviously all these tracks I just mentioned are also important to mention, as they were in previous entries in the Motorsports series. It also doesn't help that on those previous entries, I have so many good memories of me and my friends smashing cars around the Nordschleife. More importantly, racing around in James Hunt and Niki Lauda's F1 cars around the Nordschleife, which is just classic memory unlocked there. Now, they did say that the Nordschleife will be coming in spring of next year, and they are also adding Yas Marina in November for free. And the fact that they added the for free part for Yas Marina makes me think we're going to have to pay for tracks in the future. Which I would get mad about microtransactions, but as a true sim racer, I have spent my whole life savings on iRacing content. So I'm probably not in the position to comment on that decision. But what is the point of having some great tracks if you don't have the cars to go around them? Luckily, this game does not lack in the car department, having many from normal road cars to historic and modern racing cars. The game also has the aforementioned Hunt Lauda F1 cars and a couple of others, like cars from the likes of McLaren and Eagle. There are even some Holdens in there to keep us Aussies happy. At least the ones who don't support Ford. But hey, the only thing I was upset about in terms of the cars is that there are a lot of GT3 cars, a category of car I just adore driving, that were locked behind a paywall, and I didn't have any money left over to buy them. And one more thing I want to touch on the topic of automobiles, is the fact that they sound absolutely stunning in this game. If you ignore the fact that in most of my clips, all you hear is the tires crying for dear life. And this is something I never thought I would say ever in my life, but the hybrid cars just sound so good when you hear this sprawling of the engine changing from electric to combustion. It's just fabulous. The game looks pretty good too. It is definitely a graphical improvement on previous titles in the series. But at the same time, I feel in racing games, especially in the sim/simcade area of the genre, the graphics are somewhat less important. At least the environment graphics, as mostly it should look like a blur as you drive past really fast. I remember reading before I bought the game that they spent so much time working on stuff like the grass and trees and vegetation of the track, getting it just right, which you can definitely tell that, but like only if you're going slow, which I feel is counterproductive and not the point of the game. The only thing a racing game needs to be good is the interior of the cars and the lighting so that the sun can blind you after cresting a hill. And this game has done both pretty well, to the point where I have crashed into a fair few of my opponents because I could see nothing but God's heavenly embrace in my windshield. But also, as I mentioned, the outside of the cars look amazing too, which is good when you want to take screenshots, like screenshots when I wipe out half the field into T1. But the real question after all of this is, why did Microsoft decide that now was the right time to reboot a part of the Forza series that for the longest time seemed they were happy enough keeping dead? It's not like they didn't have a racing game for the Xbox, as they obviously had the Forza Horizons, the much more wildly popular part of the Forza franchise. But personally for me, I think that they rebooted Motorsports as they were losing more and more players to PlayStation. More importantly, they were losing these players to the Gran Turismo game, as it was shocking for me to find out that the previous installments of each series, that being the Forza Motorsports series and the Gran Turismo series, more specifically Forza Motorsports 7 and GT Sport, released in the same year, yet to my knowledge people were still playing GT Sport right up to the release of Gran Turismo 7, with updates and weekly races right up until that point, where I personally don't think anyone has played Forza Motorsports 7 since like 2018. It also probably didn't help that Gran Turismo is currently riding a new wave of popularities, with the movie coming out, and obviously the fact that Gran Turismo has birthed real-life race drivers. We might even get to the point where Motorsports holds its own version of the GT Academy series, which could even do very well, as it seems currently is a very good time for sim racers to take the leap over to real-world motorsports. But almost none of that I just mentioned was really about this game. So let's get back on topic with the last thing I want to touch on, and that's been, what are you doing whilst playing this game? The game does have a career series, which there is no story to, but it has you racing your way up different categories of racing, which is fine, and it gets you to drive different cars that you might not drive, especially if you're like me, who spends most of their time sim racing just hot lapping the same track and the same car for hours on end. And then there is also obviously your multiplayer online mode, which I took part in a couple of races and had a lot of fun doing so, even when I was getting rammed from out of nowhere with great malice. And then there is the free race mode, which lets you pick any car and track. Even if you do not own the car in the game, you can rent it for free, but you don't gain level points towards that car, which is another whole thing, having to level up each car individually in order to upgrade it. I do not like that one bit, if we're being honest. I can see why they did it, as it artificially increases playtime, because you have to do it with every car. You have to upgrade it. So you have to race it a bunch to level it up to upgrade it. But I personally would have preferred if just the upgrades you unlock were more tied to your overall level and not just the level of that individual car. So also, I do believe, I don't know if they've changed this or if they plan on changing this, but I remember at launch, if you say owned 2 Nissan GTR R35s, they would have different levels. Each car would have a different level. So each car would have different amount of upgrades available to it. So say you wanted a drift car and a track car. You would either have to constantly switch each car, like switch the equipment as they're obviously set up very differently, or you would have to buy 2 separate GTRs and you'd have to go through the painstaking time of leveling through each car and able to get the upgrades you need. And then if you want a couple of drift cars and a couple of downforce cars and a couple of drag cars, well then you're going to be there for a while, aren't you? But anyways, that's just my thoughts on that system. Maybe you enjoy the grinding of each car. It gives you time to learn each and every car that you buy. I do look forward to seeing how much the Turn 10 continue to support this game and to see if it gets updates and how much the tracks will cost after the free Yas Marina circuit. To see how much they plan to charge per track or if it's like a collection of tracks. And if they add some more of the more bigger popular tracks from around the world. But only time will tell and I will probably still be playing the game. Hopefully on wheel because they fix it. But for now I'm going to plug in that gamepad and do some laps around Laguna Seca.